This meeting of the Starkville Board of Aldermen will now come to order. Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance, after which Alderman Vaughn would like to open us with a word of prayer, and we will observe a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father and our God, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and the presence of your Holy Spirit. Father, we pray that you will fill this place with our integrity. And Father God, we just thank you so much for giving us a privilege to be able to handle these affairs of the city. Father God, that you will let our action be all about love. And Lord, that our light will glorify you. We ask this, Father God, to forgive us of our sin. Bless us all to conduct ourselves decently in order and do the things that you want us to do. And Lord, that you allow us to move this city in the way that you want it to be moved. We give you all praises and glory because you is our God and we are your servants. You is our Father and we are your little children. We thank you so much for controlling our destiny, not leaving us in the hand of no man. You is the controller of this universe. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
All right, you have before you a copy of the written agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the written agenda as it is before you? Alderman Vaughn.
I got one, Mr. Mayor, up on the personnel. H1, move it to consent.
All right, proposed revision from Alderman Vaughn is to place item 11H1, the hire of Momsilo Bayback and Carly Jo Winship to fill vacant positions of police officer in the police department as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Vaughn, is that your proposed revision?
Yes, it is.
I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been added to the consent agenda. Alderman Vaughn, do you have further proposed revisions? No, any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? All right, remove it from the agenda altogether. All right, the city clerk has suggested that item 11D2 was placed on the agenda in error, or excuse me, 11D3 was placed on the agenda.
I'm right, you're right, it was 2, I'm sorry, man.
All right, 11D3 or D2 was placed on the agenda in error without objection. I'll remove that matter from the agenda. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, matter's been removed from the agenda. Further proposed revisions? Are there any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? City Attorney.
I noticed that at the table tonight there's a contract relating to motorcycles for the police department. Chief Outlaw, is that a time-sensitive issue? This is the first time I've seen the contract. Can you wait till the second meeting in December?
Clerk's got some comments too.
This is a renewal of a contract that you've already approved once, but we're hearing that it's time sensitive, they need to move pretty quickly.
Let's do this then, if it's the board's pleasure, let's take it off consent, which will give me time to read it during citizen comments, and then we'll be able to act on it at that time in the agenda.
All right, what item number is that?
11I.
All right. Item 11I1 will be removed from the consent agenda. Any further proposed revisions to the agenda? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So move.
Motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. You now have before you the approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection to the approval of the consent agenda as revised? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised has been approved. That will take us to an announcements and comments by the mayor and members of the board. I have no comments this evening. Are there any comments by the members of the board? Alderman Wynn.
I need to be recognized. Tonight, this statement is in regards to a letter submitted to me by my colleagues by Mr. Hilton on behalf of the partnership. I acknowledge receiving a letter from Mr. Hilton, President of the Executive Council for the Greater Starkville Development Partnership. Mr. Hilton contacted me via phone yesterday morning. We had an amicable conversation. Mr. Hilton and I not only respect each other, but we respect our great city. He requested and invited me to lunch. I have accepted. We both concurred that we would not put this matter on the public display. Mayor, board members, board attorney, and city clerk, I have provided you with a copy of the email that I mailed Mr. Hilton on Wednesday, November 26th, and I have no further comment at this time. I yield the floor at this time.
Are there any further comments from the members of the board?
I got a couple.
Alderman Carver.
One, I just want to know publicly, everybody knows, let's say again, congratulations to the Mississippi State Bulldogs, and anytime you can bring that Egg Bowl home. If anybody's here, I say we got a couple Mississippi State people, if y'all can line up Coach Mullen, or maybe, I know I'd like to have Dak up here, but if y'all can do that, bring them in, and then maybe first meeting in January. It's always a good bragging right to have. The second thing was the Christmas parade. If you didn't make it, I mean, that was probably, I sat there last night, and it's the first time I've actually watched it in the last 5 years instead of being in it, and it was just, it's a great thing for the community. I mean, you know, the mayor was showing off the new, the smart shuttles. Those are some really good looking shuttles. If you hadn't seen one yet, you'll see them coming around. Everything about it, you know, the police did their job well, the electric department did their job well. It was just, I mean, it was first class, top notch. So again, I appreciate everybody that was involved with it.
Further comments from the members of the board? All right, seeing none, at this time, we will now hear citizen comments. Any citizen wishing to make comments may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Greetings to the mayor and the board. My name is Alvin Turner, Ward 7. We want to recognize Vice Mayor Perkins and Alderman Vaughn.
Thank you, Elder.
Thank you, Alvin.
The citizens have a few nervous concerns. A lot of people been resigning from the city. It's leaving people questioned, leaving people nervous. And we would like to know why. We hear a lot from Ward 2 and Ward 3, but we just wondering, like, what is it? A lot of people are leaving the city. We also is concerned about the garbage bag. Our October have passed, and we have to go to the store to get garbage bags. Those are just some concerns of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Mr. Mayor, may we recognize briefly?
You may.
Ms. Gandy, that's a very good question from a citizen. Could you come down front and respond to his question about the garbage bag, just as a member of the public will know, and for other members of the public to know?
Good evening, Mayor and Board. Excuse me, just
Good
a
evening.
minute, so I'm counting. The garbage bags have been ordered. The problem that we're having right now is the manufacturer is having problems at their warehouse. We've considered rejecting the bid and going with the next bid, at least I have, but that would still put us another 60 days out of getting garbage bags in. These bags are specially made for the city, and they're not sitting on a manufacturer's or a plant shelf just waiting to be issued out. They have to be made and boxed and then sent to us. So that, right now, that's the holdup. It's not that we are sitting on them and just not putting them out. We haven't gotten them in yet.
Thank you, Ms. Gandy. Thank you, Mayor.
Do we have any further citizen comments at this time?
My name is Corey Gallo. I am resident of Pleasant Acres. I'm here to talk about the Carver Drive proposal, train redevelopment. I have expertise in urban hydrology, so I feel obligated to talk about this topic. I have 2 points I think maybe have been missed in the discussion. I want to make sure they're brought forward. First of all, related to hydrology and the analysis, I reviewed the analysis that was presented. And there's 2 points with that I want to make. First of all, urban hydrology is fairly simple. You let water go faster at one point, you move it downstream to another point. I believe there's a strong possibility, based on the analysis that's been done, that those residences between Peoples and north of Hospital Drive would likely be impacted potentially negatively by the additional flow moving downstream. This hasn't been analyzed because the elevation of those homes has not been mapped along with the flood elevation. If you look at the map that was submitted to FEMA, the red line that says the 100-year event happens to go right on the edge of several homes. And so we don't know exactly where that is because those home elevations weren't mapped. I think it's a consideration that needs to be addressed. And if the proposal goes forward, it's likely that the culvert at that location would probably have to be modified as well, potentially. It needs to be explored. Second is an issue of just safety and the design of what's being proposed. Communities all over the country are tearing out concrete swales to put naturalized swales in from an economic sustainability standpoint. I want to point out visually the proposal that what is actually being proposed is a 6-foot deep, concrete lined, one-on-one side slope. For those of you that don't get that too easily, I have a visual to give you. Pythagorean theorem, 6'6", you figure out that the side slope is 8 foot 6 inches long, so I take my tape measure out, go to 8 feet 6, I'm 5 foot 9 inches. So right there, so 3 inches over my head. That is the side slope of the concrete swale that you're proposing to go through 12 residential houses in their backyard, which is going to be carrying flows, and peak flows is bank full all the way to the top. Certainly something I wouldn't want going to the back of my home. And so those are two considerations I think. I'm not sure if they've been addressed. This is actually the second meeting I've ever been to. But I think because of my expertise, I just wanted to share them and give you my perspective and my thoughts on what I think are two issues that should be considered besides other things that I'm sure that people have brought up related to costs and environmental issues. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallo. Do we have any further citizen comments? Public hearing. Yeah, we will have 2 public hearings tonight on each of the ordinances that are being presented. So if you have a comment on those matters, you can always comment in citizen comments, but I would recommend that you comment during the public hearing.
Hi, Chris Galbraith, Ward 2. I'll just briefly say that given Mr. Stone's departure, I would encourage you guys to reconsider Alderman Walker's proposal of having a group, which would include community input, consider the sidewalk ordinance, if you guys do want to move forward with any revisions to that. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Any further citizen comments? Do we have any further citizen comments?
Jim Gafford, Ward 5, and I would just like to echo Mr. Galbraith's call that you revisit Mr. Walker's proposal. It is a sound proposal. It is one that involves people smarter than all of you put together, because as we learned when I was in school, none of us are smarter than all of us. And so I would encourage us to work in a deliberative manner, seeking expertise where it may be found. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gafford. Do we have any further citizen comments?
I'm going to tag team onto both what Corey Gallo said and what Chris Galbraith and Jim Gafford have said. Mr. Gallo, I know, is in no way saying that things don't need to be addressed at Carver Drive, and I know that it is a long-term and very political issue. But I do think that there's a real safety concern that we weren't aware of as we set out on the path of coming up with a solution for that ditch. I think he also raises a very valid point that the concrete channeling of that ditch is going to create water problems downstream at the People's Circle there on Reed Road, and I'm terrible with directions, but just shortly away from Hospital Drive. The best example I can give you, I'm a fairly simple person, but the best example I can give you is that this ditch is working like it's supposed to right now. It will expand, but it expands because it has to handle more water, sort of like your Thanksgiving elastic waist pants as opposed to those that button. When you have those elastic waist pants on, a little more comfortable, things function like they're supposed to. Those tight buttoned pants, not so much. So that's what's going to happen with that water. It's going to be constricted it's going to create a problem further down. And I do think, especially in Mr. Snowden's absence, that considering using a committee would be very wise on y'all's part. I know y'all are all very busy, very, very busy. And I think having someone help with that review process would be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Sistrunk. Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments?
Good evening to the board.
Good
I'd
evening,
like to say
Sandy.
good evening, especially to our mayor, to our vice mayor, and all my aldermen. I don't go around naming everyone, I just say all my aldermen. I would just like to say it's the season of Thanksgiving. Thank God for you and for the job that you're doing. I would like to thank you for what you're doing. I always remember faith is better than doing what everybody wants you to do. I always remember what you do is for the community. I would just like to say thank you each and every one. All of the resignations that you got, and you can't do anything about it. People move on with their life. They really do. They move on with their lives, and what goes on, goes on. But I would just like to say, special committees or whatever committees you have, you are our elected officials. You are. We elected you. And I would just like to say, keep doing the job that you're doing. Keep marching on. Thank you all so much for this year, which is about to go out. I would just like to thank y'all for it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ivey.
Thank you.
Do we have any further citizen comments?
Thank you again.
Okay.
Milo Vernon from Ward 2, and I would just like to say that I hope that as a group you will work with speed and haste at filling the now vacant position of head of the Community Development Department. That position has been vacant for far too long, and I know, Mr. Mayor, that it's a burden on you as an additional job as heading that up in the time that Mr. Snowden has been on sick leave. And I hope that the board will act with haste in finding a well-qualified individual and filling that position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnham. Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to our public hearings. We have two public hearings tonight. The first is the first public hearing on an ordinance deleting the administrative adjudication process ordinance and amending other ordinances that have reference to the process of administrative adjudication. I will introduce this, and then I'll ask the city attorney to supplement, as he has done the heavy lifting on this revision. For several years, the city operated what was a pretty innovative administrative adjudication process that functioned somewhat like a court, even though it was not officially a court, to deal with what are sometimes referred to as nuisance code violations. These are things such as not keeping your grass cut or having trash containers left out on the street, that while they violate city law, we don't tend to think of them as a criminal offense, and they carry fines with them. Well, rather than sending all of those through the municipal court process, the city, with the guidance of the Attorney General's office, created a process where an administrative judge was brought in to hear any appeals over those matters that anybody might have, disagreement as to why they were being fined or whether the fine was justified under the law for one of those offenses. It's a process that worked well in moving those offenses through the system and allowed them to be brought to completion so that the code enforcement officer could continue to effectively enforce the nuisance code. We received subsequent guidance a while back from the Attorney General's office that after reviewing that matter again, they really didn't think it was such a good idea under state law. We then asked them if they were really sure, given the first opinion they'd given us and that we'd been operating it for a while, and they said, we're really, really sure. That left us searching for an answer because under state law, statute really doesn't give us a whole lot of choice that these matters have to go to municipal court because they have been devoted to the municipal judge, the appeals of such matters. The problem with that, in addition to potential backlog, which the backlog is not a huge issue because municipal court processes a whole lot of cases anyways, is that everything that goes to municipal court carries with it a state assessment that the city has to pass on that is in excess of $100. Well, considering that most of these fines are $20 or less, you're stacking on 5 times what the fine is actually worth just to have it heard in municipal court. So, after many months of massaging this, we've come up with a solution that we hope will avoid the situation where all of these penalties are immediately subject to that multiplying effect, but also will allow us the remedy that can bring these matters to a conclusion so that the code enforcement officer does effectively carry the full penalty that's there if somebody refuses to pay their fine. So the way this process is designed is for nuisance code violations, the city will assess tickets as has always been the practice. And then for a 30-day period, individuals will have the opportunity to pay those without it entering the court system. If that penalty is not satisfied after a month, then it will be referred to municipal court and it will get stacked with the standard penalties that we can't control. And this is a housekeeping measure that addresses that not only in the general ordinance that created the administrative adjudication process, but also in all of the other ordinances we have that reference that administrative adjudication process. Would you like to add anything?
I actually have nothing to add to that.
All right, Alderman Carver.
Yeah, that was a good description. Basically, the way I would explain it to myself was if somebody had a $15 fine, there's no point in giving them a $150 fine. Most of the time, somebody is a one-time offense and moves on. That being said, I think this is fair. I mean, we look for answers. I'm so glad y'all did a good job. This is a great thing. And a lot of times this summer, I had some people would complain and they're not cutting the grass, on and on and on all through the summer. Where they, now you got a way to go back and combat that. So, again, 2 thumbs up. Couldn't have done it a better way. So.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll now hear general public comments on the matter, and we'll start by just hearing those 3 minutes at a time. If it appears that I need to split those in 4 and against, then we'll do that. Anyone wishing to make comment on the proposed ordinance may come forward, introduce yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak?
Ward 3. I have a question, and I'm delighted that y'all found an answer because we struggled with it for a while, but I have a question about how that policy, is it going to be a policy, is it going to be an ordinance, because you're repealing this ordinance. Is it going to be something that the court does? Is it going to be online so that we can reference it? Because there are those of us who are potentially subject to the trash violations as much as anything. So I understand what you're saying, but how will it be known? How will it be made known to the public? So
Yeah. Lynn, the attempt of this ordinance was to take care of it with one-step shopping.
Right.
To the extent that it doesn't go far enough, I'll look at that, and we can establish it by ordinance, but I think it does need to be established by ordinance to make it as solid as possible.
Okay, but if we got a code violation, we would go to Tony and pay it, or you go to the building department and pay it? Some of those kinds of details I think would be appropriate for those of us who are potentially subject to it to know.
I think those are points well taken.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comment? Is there any further comment on the proposed ordinance revision? Any further comment? All right, seeing none, do we have any concluding comments by the members of the board? Any concluding comments by the members of the board? Seeing none, that will conclude this, our first public hearing on the ordinance deleting the administrative adjudication process. And we will now hold our first, and what I would recommend would be our only public hearing on the proposed ordinance granting a non-exclusive franchise agreement to Telepec Networks. And Mr. Clement is setting up a video. It's a short video clip that I'd like to use in an introduction of this proposed franchise agreement. And what this is a small video clip that appeared on CBS this morning, earlier this year. And I'd like to show it because it very succinctly tells the story of the technology that is at issue with this franchise agreement that I was first so inspired by. and I would like to use it to tell my own story as to how we got here today. So we'll give Mr. Clements a second to cue up.
And which city has the fastest internet service in the nation? It's not San Francisco or Seattle or a college town like Boston. The answer is actually Chattanooga, Tennessee, population 167,000. And Jeff Glore is here to show us why. Jeff, good morning.
Nora, good morning to you. If you want to see what the rest of the world is going to look like in 10 or 15 years, how most of us will be getting online specifically, look at the fourth largest city in Tennessee. It's an inspiring comeback story and a blueprint for the future.
The Federal Environmental Protection Agency says the pollution level reached emergency proportions Tuesday night.
In 1969, Walter Cronkite famously reported the EPA's finding that Chattanooga, Tennessee was the dirtiest city in America. It was a low point for a region with high pride. More than 4 decades later, you'd hardly recognize the place. Chattanooga has not only changed its look, including a new $120 million waterfront, it has transformed its industry, a burgeoning tech hub that offers an astounding gig of internet speed to everyone, the only city in the country to do so. Highest speeds in the Western Hemisphere.
That's the rumor.
When people hear that in Chattanooga, what's the reaction you get?
It really blows people's minds. They think there's no way that that's possible.
Sheldon Grizzle is a Chattanooga transplant who runs the CoLab, which helps startup companies get off the ground.
For me, from an entrepreneurial perspective, it's really exciting because we see these teams that we would have never, they would have never thought of locating here. Now they're calling Chattanooga home because we have an asset that they can build on that they can't do that anywhere else.
The reason for that is this. The fiber optic lines that can provide anyone in a 600 square mile area that gig of online speed. To put that gig in perspective, the average American home gets about 5 megabits of internet speed. This is 200 times faster. This is all about fiber.
It's all about fiber.
Harold DePriest is president of Chattanooga's Electric Power Board.
What fiber does is collapse time and space. So the very fringes of our network, which is way, way out in the country, it's just exactly the same as if it were in the middle of downtown Chattanooga.
Fiber lines have been in use since the 1960s, but they almost never were carried into individual homes. Here they are.
We built this interstate highway system, but we didn't put a lot of off-ramps. What we're building is the off-ramp. We're building the off-ramp that comes into the city streets and then all the way up to your driveway.
The board initially installed the fiber lines as an energy savings tool, so power outages could be restored faster, in seconds instead of days. But the $300 million investment paid off in unanticipated ways, when internet service was rolled on top of it.
It's like having electricity 10 to 15 years before any other community has electricity.
Since the gig was launched, entrepreneurs all the way from California to Ireland have arrived to test just how far it will go, bringing with them $400 million in investment money and 6,000 jobs, many of them heeding Grizzle's call.
Start building applications now, start building devices now, or if you're building them somewhere else, come test them here now.
Because how the rest of the world is going to look in 10 years is how Chattanooga looks
today.
There must have been a lot of people who said, you can't do this.
Our support was always in the 80–88% range. So the support was always huge. Most of the opposition was based on the notion, well, we're a government entity and government just isn't smart enough to do anything right. They were wrong. We were smart enough to figure it out.
In 2013, Chattanooga sits as a city transformed. The best of the old world combined with the best of the new, and an unlikely example for the rest of the country.
We live in a day and age when people blow smoke all the time. They talk about what they're going to do and their talk exceeds what they're really doing. We're the other way around. We actually have it. We have built the network. It is up and working and it's here. But a lot of people have to come and see it to believe it.
Jeff, thank you so much. The question is, can other cities do this?
They can, but they have to make an investment. They have to have a plan and they have to make an investment. They have to have a lot of money. I mean, this is long-term planning. This is not something that crept up in the last couple weeks here, a couple months. This took more than a decade to plan out, and now they're seeing the fruits of their labor.
So what's interesting too is that he says this is an example in his mind of big government working.
It is a government entity. This is EPB, and so he says in this case, they did it right. Now keep in mind you have to pay for the service. It costs money, but they have to recoup money on their investments.
So if we had an internet that was 200 times faster than what I have now.
Netflix.
So I had the question before I typed it in.
Netflix all day long, that's right. And remember, this is also partially
House of Cards.
of unintended, yes indeed, of unintended economic consequences.
Yeah.
This is something they first put up so that they could restore power outages faster in seconds instead of days. And they said, wait a minute, we can roll the internet on top of this.
What's interesting about this to me is that, you know, this idea of government can do interesting things. You know, and the private and the public working together made a difference for a city.
Anybody can do something interesting. It
Yeah.
just has to be planned out the right way.
And funded well.
And funded the right way.
All right, Chattanooga. Love Chattanooga. Jeff Bloor, thank you.
All right. I am not an overly tech-savvy individual. I first encountered that story from the perspective of a mayor. And what I saw was an absolute transformation of a city because a technological breakthrough that they had. And my first thought as mayor is every mayor is in the business of trying to figure out how to get their city ahead. How do we do something like this in Starkville? Chattanooga's not the only one. Chattanooga gets widespread recognition. There are approximately 50 cities in the United States in some manner or another. Some with private partners, some as a complete government entity that are dabbling in this area. So what I did was loaded up a crew of city staff members, and we went up to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we visited with that guy that had the funny mustache in that video. And he is very, very proud of his system, and he should be. And I wanted to hear how they did it, their story, what their challenges were. And the things he told me that stuck out, the biggest challenges, seemed very steep, if not insurmountable. He said the first thing you need to know is this is a very capital intensive program. You're going to have to make a huge upfront investment to bring something new into your community. And this was looking at it from the standpoint, we operate an electric department just like Chattanooga does. So that's how we were originally looking at it. He said the second thing you need to know is the only way that you're ever going to revenue this system is if you offer what's commonly referred to as triple play. The internet service itself won't pay for everything. You're going to have to use this system for what else it can do, and that is to offer cable service and landline telephone service. And that's how you get the long-term revenue for the payback on the system. And so another significant issue you're almost certain to encounter is your cable company is probably going to fight you tooth and nail. They are used to having a monopoly or something very close to it. And if you start offering cable service in the market, you're going to have an opponent. So I'm thinking to myself, very, very steep expenditures with no guaranteed return on investment for the city, and potential regulatory minefield with an opponent. I was not completely deterred. I was still convinced this is an opportunity that we had to look at as a city. But I will be honest, it's something that I thought would be a very long-term endeavor. Now, the last visit that we made to Chattanooga, ironically enough, was in September. That was the same month that C Spire made a groundbreaking announcement for the state of Mississippi. They announced that they were going to be the first private entity that was going to take on deploying gigabit fiber to the home in a state. Now, they can't go everywhere in a state because the technology and the payoff on it is just too risky. So they said, what we're going to do is we're going to have a competition, and we're going to seek to find test case cities where we can go and deploy this technology, get the kinks worked out of it, and see if the financial model works to offer it in other places in Mississippi. Well, my immediate thought when I heard about the competition is, good gracious, this is a path where we could actually do this. And we're not talking about maybe 10 years from now, we might be able to offer this. We're talking about as early as 2014, this technology can be deployed in our community. So I said to our folks, we got to do whatever we can to be one of their test case cities in that competition. And they had a process that started with a request for information. They sent that out to everybody in the state of Mississippi. Every city was eligible to apply. And it is appropriate at this point for me to express some gratitude to our staff. We had several staff members that worked long and hard getting our request for information filled out, and the staff of the Golden Triangle Development Link. They worked hand in hand for the better part of a month, and they were successful. Last month, the city of Starkville was one of 9 cities that was selected as a test market for this service for C Spire. 33 cities applied. So we were very honored to be standing on the stage at the C Spire headquarters in Ridgeland when that announcement was made. And now at this point, we're to the next phase in that process. The city has to adopt a franchise agreement before the official rollout of this program. And that is why I'm asking for this to be considered tonight, even though we'll only get to have one public hearing on it. That is a policy that we set for ourselves, and we do have the authority to deviate from policy. And if ever there was a time to deviate from that 2 public hearing policy, I think staring the potential of losing this in the face if we don't get this done tonight would be the opportunity to deviate from that policy. So the fundamentals of the franchise agreement. What is a franchise agreement? What the franchise agreement is it is the basically contractual document that the city has with the service provider. What the city gives up is it gives up limited access to its right-of-way, so they can use it to build the system. It's not exclusive. Because we give that access, it doesn't mean we can't give another potential franchisor down the road access. It doesn't do anything to harm the existing franchisees that we have that are already in the system. Now, in return for that, what the city gets is our citizens have the opportunity to avail themselves of this service, and additionally, for the gross revenue that's produced off of the video services, the city gets a maximum of 5% on basic video services. And for phone services, the city gets 2% on gross revenues offered by that service. So in exchange for giving up access to dirt that's in city right-of-way, those are the things that we get. That's the nuts and bolts of what we're discussing tonight. Now, prior to legally being able to roll this out and offer this to our customers, C Spire has to have this agreement approved. The next phase of the competition, which is set to kick into gear tomorrow, will consist of C Spire unveiling websites in each of the 9 communities that have approved this franchise agreement. They'll have the communities gridded into neighborhoods. Everybody will be able to go onto that website, sign up expressing interest in having the service, and at this point you'll have to pay a $10 deposit because they want to know if you're serious about being interested in the service. And once they have enough interest in each of those neighborhoods for the model to be economically viable, they know they have enough potential customers they can make it work financially, they will deploy fiber to those neighborhoods. Now, where it stands currently, there are 6 cities of the 9 that have already approved this franchise agreement. 3 of us are taking it up tonight. I have received word from Hattiesburg and Horn Lake, which are the other 2 communities, that both of them expect to approve it. So hopefully, all 9 of us tomorrow will be rolled out as test studies, adding to the approximately 50 cities in the country where citizens can get gigabit per second internet service. And I do really believe that this is a transformation. And this is something that will greatly improve our city for years to come. At this point, do we have any questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Carter.
You know, first of all, I'm in favor of this. I think at the end of the day, I'll go on and just voice that. A couple of questions I had, though. You know, if you get into this from a financial standpoint, return on investment, well, we're going to, you know, if we pass this tonight and we show our support as a Board of Aldermen, Mayor, and it gets voted through, and then the city, you know, you're saying basically it goes out to the residents, and then they've got to have enough people sign up where they know they get their return on investment, and then they're gonna start deploying fiber. So if that baseline number is not hit, and C Spire is not able to make the project happen here just because of that, have we had any kind of financial loss at that point? And what kind of risk do we carry as a city financially on this deal?
No, we don't gain or lose anything until they deploy. Once they start deploying and delivering services to customers, that's when we start reaping the benefit of the percentage revenue. But really, until they have customers and are deploying, they're not using our right of way.
I understand that. The way I look at this is just kind of one of those issues, you know, everybody talks about being a leader in the state, and we're starting to do that. And so when you do that, you start, you know, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be reading about other people in the headlines, you know, I don't want to be looking back 10 years later going, man, you know, wish we'd done that. You know, we look at Columbus and they offer some things that we just don't have, rail and a river over there for transportation and things like that. But we have research-based capabilities here. We have a lot of technology-driven industry, and that's because we're a university town. And this is one of those things, I think it just kind of goes hand in hand with the university and our capabilities as a city and a community to be out there and to be in the, you know, in the leadership position and look back 10 years and go, man, that was a good decision. The way I read this at the end of the day, it was that C Spire is taking most of the risk, and C Spire is, you know, it's going to be a long time before they get that investment. But you know, if this passes tonight, I would encourage everybody in the city to go on, and if you know you're going to do it, go on and sign up and get your number in there. So it's not one of those deals we have to come back and push for the last couple of months to, you know, if you're going to do it and you know you're going to do it, and I'm going to be one of them, just go on and sign up so they can start getting that base group of individuals, and they kind of know what they're working with and if they can even make this happen. But you know, from an elected official, I would like to put my stamp of approval on it, and I guess and see if this can happen. So thank you.
Alderman Nguyen.
Board Attorney Latimer, and I know the answer to this question, but I just want you to clarify. Are the terms of this agreement legal?
All of them except arguably the 45-year term.
Will you explain the 45-year term to the?
By state statute, a franchise agreement is capped out at 25 years. This contract has an automatic renewal in it that it renews for 2 periods of 10 years each automatically. And as the contract is drafted now, the city doesn't have an express out for that renewal to kick in.
Okay.
So that makes it arguably a 45-year term.
Right, because those two consecutive years of 10 plus 10 would be 20 years. My next question is this a bad deal?
I can't answer that. That's a business decision and a public policy decision the board has to
Okay.
make.
Let me ask you this, and then you may choose not to do it. Would you be favorable toward this?
Again,
Okay.
Alderman Nguyen, I have to
Okay.
make sure y'all know what's in the contract, the key terms in the contract,
Mhm.
the legal implications from those terms, and the legal implications from the deal as a whole.
Mhm.
And from my comments from the previous board meeting, my comments between these 2 board meetings, and my comments today, and also in writing to the board today,
Mhm.
I feel like you guys are well informed to make your decision.
Okay.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Maynard.
Mr. Mayor, I think we need to support this for a number of reasons. One, I think we are a cutting-edge city and want to be a cutting-edge city. Number 2, C Spire is just invested, or in the process of investing, $20 million into a new facility being built in the research park. That is going to yield over $200,000 a year to our school system, even though the city tax is waived first 10 years. That does not waive the school tax. So that's over $200,000 a year coming into our school system here. And finally, I want to support this because I think this gives Joey Deason and the GTR link a carrot to sell our city. As Alderman Carver pointed out, we may not have the rail, we may not have the river, but this gives them an additional tool to sell industry to our city and to representatives there. I think that makes us a good choice.
Further questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Walker.
just like to say that I'm certainly in support of this. I think one of the things that we saw from the video that you showed was one of the biggest hurdles that you mentioned that we have to get over is the huge capital expenditure that we would have to come that would be required. In this case, thanks to C-Spire, we don't have that capital expenditure, and I think that's something that makes this a deal very feasible and puts us in a position to be an outstanding leader of where we want to go. This is another example of trying to move the city forward, and I'm really supportive of it.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move into the citizen comment period. At this time, any citizen wishing to come forward and speak for a maximum of 3 minutes may do so by coming forward and introducing yourself.
Meeting to the mayor and board, my name is Alvin Connor Ward 7. We're gonna lose a generation. I'm 54 years old. Stuff that too sensitive, I don't trust. When we had the 8-party phone line, once someone could take the phone off the hook, couldn't nobody talk. Finally, we got away from the 8-party line. Then they said that we needed converter boxes. You have picture-perfect picture. Converter boxes didn't work. We wound up with cable because we got tired of the converter box. Things that are too sensitive, and then the older generation, 54-year-old and all that don't trust real sensitive stuff. It's taking a gamble when we take a chance and lose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
Williams. I'm from Ward 1, and I'll try to keep it up under 3 minutes for you. Respected Alderman, I'm a professor at MSU in the field of communication. My expertise is in the area of how media impacts society, but I've also done research on how new technologies impact society. I was trained at the University of Georgia at the Dowden Center for New Media Studies, which later became the Dowden Center for the Study of Interactive Television. I was one of the first academics to study the deployment of the digital video recorder, known primarily then as TiVo, back in the 2000s, and predicted how it would change the way users watch television today. I say these things not in boast, but just to let you know that I've done my homework. It's with this understanding that I cannot stress to you highly enough how your decision to move forward with gigabit Ethernet service within the city means to the transformative future of Starkville. What C-Spire offers is an agreement to join us with other cities in Mississippi to create what will certainly be seen as the new Silicon South. In much the same way Silicon Valley exploded, and now we see how Kansas is exploding, and Chattanooga, we have no reason not to believe this massive rollout of Mississippi gigabit cities will also pull innovative new businesses to our town and state. Recent research of 69 communities who made the jump to gigabit service found that doing so significantly increased the number of business establishments within those communities by 11%. Annual payroll of those businesses increased 27%. Number of employees increased by 12%. The annual median family income increased by 8%. Local property values, as well as tax revenues from those properties, also experienced a significant increase. And most of this happened within a 3-year span of time and controlling for other outside variables. The federal government is so encouraged by the numbers that the FCC stated in January it wanted to see at least 1 gigabit community deployed in each state by 2015. The World Bank has conducted research that indicates every US dollar invested in telecommunications infrastructure returns $6 in economic returns related to regional employment and economic development. Hopefully you now understand how connecting various cities in Mississippi, far greater than just the one hoped for by the federal government, is, as you say, a transformative process for our community rather than just an eventual change. Signing off on this franchise agreement will also provide much needed competition within our local telecommunications sector. As it stands now, there's really only one cable provider, really only one major telephone company. Your internet is primarily only attainable through 2 companies in town. I fail to see how increasing competition takes anything away from the city, especially given the numbers I provided indicating the business and income can grow from such a gigabit rollout. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll give my comments careful consideration. I know my students have indicated that they anxiously await such new services. Telecommuting, telemedicine, distance education, and e-commerce would all be affected by the decision you make.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tom Stockman. I'm a graduate student at Mississippi State University. I'm also a business owner. I own a small product design company. And I just wanted to talk just from my perspective, very much related to what he was just talking about. Internet is extremely important to businesses, at least technical businesses. It's very frequent that I have to send and download large design files, and it's really burdensome if I try to do it at my house. I actually usually just operate at the university, which is the best place I can find internet. I communicate with manufacturers in China, and it's embarrassing to me, but I think probably also embarrassing to the city and even the state when I'm on a Skype call with someone in China and it's my end of the internet that's going to cut out and I can't communicate effectively with them. So I just wanted to share that, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Board, Mayor, my name is Adrian Marcus, graduate of Mississippi State 2012. I'm representing a younger generation of entrepreneurs now that are existing here in Starkville. Actually own my own business, a part of a couple more who are present here now. We actually operate in the research part where the 6-spire building is going to be built, and we are in full support of this project. One, the direction of the city. I am of a rare breed of young students that graduate from Mississippi State that actually want to stay here. I actually want to, I've expressed to many people here, the mayor, how I actually want to, start my family here, but, it has to start somewhere. And this fiber, is a big part for us, a big thing for us. Growing my business, we've already hired, as a 2-year startup business from the ground, we've already hired 5 people. We have 6 interns, and we're continuing to grow, providing jobs, and this internet is a big thing for us. We telecommunicate, work with businesses in Starkville, as well as in West Point and businesses outside the state. So the internet is a big part for us as far as, uploading files, graphics, and videos, and building websites, and full rollout creative campaigns for companies. So just expressing my support for the fiber.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Further comments?
I'm Brad Fuller. My real job, I'm a lobbyist for the university, so I can see this from the economic development, business development side as well. About a year and a half ago, as a side full-time job, we started a small social media network. We've been building it. We haven't really promoted it to date. But over the course of 2014, once we finish this fundraise in December, we're going to spend about $1.2 million nationally advertising. So if we don't make it, it won't be for lack of marketing. With that said, we've raised money from all over the country. We talked to venture capital groups all over the country, and this exact thing is something that a group out of Austin has been telling us why we need to relocate to Austin, because they are getting this kind of service. And the reason that is, if we're able to grow, if we're able to get users, the largest side of our function will be the back end of the site you'll never see, the admin side where we're having to review anything that's flagged from video content to photo content. And so we'll have to employ a significant amount of people to do that if we can be successful. And this is something that would allow us to stay here in that instance instead of having to move somewhere else. We've been all around presenting at different venture networks and things like that, and there's a lot of these kinds of companies in Mississippi. Like Adrian said, I see several others in here today, and this is something that, throughout the state even gives people a good reason to locate here in Starkville, and just wanted to stand up and express my support for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller.
Milo Burnham from Ward 2. I've heard a lot of comments tonight. I wouldn't want them to wind up being described as a great dessert after a lousy meal. The gigabyte sounds great. Personally, I don't need it. The world is going faster than I can keep up with now, and like Alvin, I don't have that many years ahead of me. I've got a number of years on him. So when I moved from AT&T and their 0.19 megabytes per second to what I have now at 14, that was a world of change for me. I don't need a gigabyte of speed, but I certainly wouldn't want to deny it to anybody else, because there are people who need it. So in that part, I support it. What I'm concerned about is, one, the rush into this thing, and how this came up to be the fact that there is no time as to who set the date so that we could only have one public hearing and try to rush this thing through. When the board rushes things, I get concerned, because we don't always get what we want. I read the agreement as it appeared in the e-packet. I don't know whether it's still the same agreement, because things have a tendency to change between Friday and Tuesday. So I don't know whether it's the same agreement, and I don't know whether all the other 8 cities got the same agreement that we're considering tonight. But there were some things in there that concern me. One of these, under facilities, it says, as a definition in the agreement, telecommunication amplifiers, electronics, transmissions, and reception equipment, pedestals, towers. Now, it doesn't specify the type of tower. And now, a gentleman in the audience made a comment to me and said, well, it's not going to be a phone tower. But it doesn't specify towers. And having dealt with the fact that the city has an ordinance that is very anti-tower, and actually the agreement has a statement in there of other ordinances notwithstanding, which means, you know, the city has no control over any of the ordinances that this agreement would impinge upon. Because it seems to me that when it says any other ordinance notwithstanding, so I'm concerned about that. The construction gives them the possibility of putting this in any public way, and I wonder about the word any, because that means anywhere within the city. And that means on both public property and, I think in this case, on private property. And it states further on that if something needs to be moved, if the cable needs to be moved, it can only be moved at the expense of the person making the request. And I don't know whether when somebody in town moves a house, whether they have to pay to have an electric line moved, or whether the city eats that in the process. But in this case, it specifies that the person making the request must pay it, and they must make the request to give them 90 days. And, you know, this is quite a holdup. So I'm concerned about that. I wonder who's going to be the city, that means I have 1 minute, right? Or who's going to be the city point man on this thing? You have 10 days to name somebody, according to the agreement. That once it's signed, you have 10 days to name who's going to be the project manager, who's the point man, who is going to be that person. And I'm concerned about that. The trimming of trees. It says that the company has the right to trim anything that they deem necessary and to give restitution, reasonable restitution. What is reasonable? Who defines reasonable? And what's reasonable in this case? So I have my concerns about the wordage in the agreement. I hate to see us get locked into something. I wish there was more time. I really do. I'm concerned, and I seem to be the only one who's concerned about the wording in the agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnham. Further comments?
My name is Patrick Quinn, Ward 4, and I'm from Starkville, Mississippi. Not born and raised, came here when I was in the 4th grade, but at 32 years old, this is my home. I've seen a lot of friends and family that I've graduated high school with, became friends with at school, that have come and kind of taken from Starkville and Mississippi State what they could and went on about their ventures somewhere else. And so for a long time in my life, one of the biggest questions of how to make Starkville better, or how to get other people to think about what I think about when I think of Starkville as someone that came here and moved his life here, was that how do we get people that graduate Mississippi State to stay and create their family life here as well? And obviously that requires certain jobs and certain abilities that we might not be able to provide those folks. So Brad and I actually have a lot in common. We're both from Starkville and both kind of in the same business, at least his part-time, full-time job. We created a website / mobile app for the city of Starkville that basically takes information locally for all the businesses around town, and it gives the users the visibility of what they've got. So this fiber actually does a lot for our business from a standpoint of how many people I can have in the office on a computer working on the same thing at one time, or how long it takes the programmer to write the things that he has to write, that the development manager has put on his plate for the admin system like Brad was talking about. But from a personal standpoint, aside from just a business standpoint, Mississippi State athletics kind of dictate sales to an extent, retail sales at least in Starkville. When you have a lot of winning feelings about what's going on with the athletic programs, a lot of people come to those games and a lot of people spend money. So I guess my point is that, you know, if we took Mississippi State away from Starkville, we would take some of that excitement away as well. And for those that aren't an athletic fan of any kind, this is something that actually brings jobs to Starkville. It actually brings business to Starkville. It brings the actual residents and the local citizens that aren't in that kind of business an opportunity to have whatever it is that they want to have shown too. So I think it's tremendous for Starkville, and I think it's definitely an opportunity that we don't need to pass up.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Further citizen comments? Any further comments?
Mr. Mayor. I'm Ryan Pearson, Executive Vice President and General Counsel of MetroCast Communications, which is the incumbent cable provider of video, internet, and phone services here in the city of Starkville. Yesterday, I had submitted to be placed on the official record a written statement.
Yeah, make sure the clerk's got a copy.
Which I believe every member of the board has received, but if not, here's copies.
Mr. General, Mayor, may we recognize?
You may.
Mr. General Counsel, what led you to believe that each member of the board had a copy of this?
I had sent an email out to each of you based on the email address that was available on the city of Starkville.
I received a copy.
You received it?
I had not received the counsel.
So I apologize, Mr. Perkins, Alderman Perkins. Maybe we got your email address. Sorry. I apologize. So unlike, we've listened to a lot of good information here today, and I want to make it clear that what we're not here to do is to say that fiber is bad or technology is bad. We're a fiber company and a technology company. MetroCast has been in Starkville since 2008, and since that time, what we've done is made a multi-million-dollar investment to push fiber optics into this town in a very significant fashion. Since coming to town, we have provided over almost $1 million in franchise fees to the city, and on an annual basis, we provide basic cable service to a number of municipal buildings, hospitals, libraries, and other public facilities. In addition, we pay in excess of $25,000 a year in pole rent for the right to be in the public rights of way. Unlike the mayor was warned, we're not here to fight tooth and nail to stop a competitor from coming to town. We're very comfortable with competition. But the purpose of this meeting is not to determine whether fiber's good, whether gigabit service is good. The purpose of the meeting is to determine whether the agreement that's been put in front of you today is a fair agreement and a good deal for the city. Alderwoman Nguyen, you asked the question, is this a good deal? This is not a good deal. And if you grabbed other franchise agreements and looked at them from both incumbent and competitive operators, what you would see is that this agreement doesn't obligate Telepac to do anything. If you feel that gigabit service is important, fiber to the home service is important, the agreement should say that. The gentleman who spoke earlier questioning some of the provisions of the agreement, there's a number of provisions in this agreement that should be questioned. And all that we're asking the city to do is to take the time to consider the agreement. The FCC has set up timeframes so that they're reasonable. And I would ask myself the question, if I were on the board, if somebody tells me that I need to agree to something in a day's time, or else I lose the opportunity to be part of what they're offering, to me that seems patently unreasonable. In addition, our franchise under which we operate in the city, Ordinance 2006-03, imposes a range of service, payment, network build-out obligations which we consistently on a day-to-day basis meet or exceed. It also contains a provision that states that while the city can grant competitive franchises to other providers, no such grant shall be made on terms and conditions less restrictive than those contained in our ordinance. It's our position that the franchise that's been proposed by Telepac can flex with Section 3B of our ordinance because of the excessively reduced restrictions that have been placed upon Telepac in the ordinance that they've proposed. Again, we're very comfortable with competition. We just want to make sure that the city gets a deal that's a good deal for the city and a good deal for its residents. And if you take the time, which I'm sure all of you have, to read this franchise as the gentleman over here did, what you'll see is Telepac has no obligation to build a network or provide any service. Telepac would have the franchise rights for 45 years. So you're being asked to approve an agreement that's going to exist for 45 years. Telepac would pay franchise fees on a smaller portion of video revenue than we do. So Alderman Carver, to your point,
Wrap up.
to your point, the question of whether there could be a reduction in revenue for the city, yes, there can. Because if this ordinance passes, we're going to have to look at what all of our rights are. But at a minimum, we're going to come back to the city and have our restrictions and obligations reduced to match what Telepac's are. So immediately what you'll see is a reduction in the franchise fees that we would pay, in addition to possibly a reduction in the pole attachment fees that we pay. Another thing to keep in mind is that this agreement includes a provision that allows Telepac to sell its assets and this franchise without the city having any say. So you're granting a 45-year agreement to you don't know who. It may be a Telepac or it may be to the person that they sell their assets to. So you should keep that in mind also. For all of these reasons, we would recommend that the board not approve this particular franchise, but rather take the time to negotiate a fair and reasonable franchise with Telepac. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
I had one question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Mr. Pearson, when was y'all's contract taken out? When was the agreement? Was that 08?
We inherited the agreement. It was assigned to us in 2008.
Okay, and it was a 10-year agreement, am I correct?
That agreement expires in 2016 and was issued in 2006. That's correct, 10 years.
So you will be back in front of this board and at that time be able to renegotiate that contract, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We will.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
Thank you.
Further citizen comments? Any further citizen comment? Any further citizen comments? All right, seeing none, we will move back into concluding comments by the members of the board. Any concluding comments by Alderman Perkins?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the recognition. Let me just preface my remarks and comments by saying it's good to have economic development. It's good to be pro-business. It's good to be pro-growth. But at the same time, any business that is seeking to come into our community must be willing to work with the governing body. I want to echo on the citizen from Ward 2 there, made some very good relevant comments during the citizens comment section. What is the hurry? What is the rush? Why is this board only having one public hearing? If C-Spire is really, really interested in working with this city, then they would sit down with this body and come up with some very mutual and agreeable terms. Of course, I don't have to rely upon an attorney to advise me on this contract. I've been practicing law for 25 years, licensed to practice in the state of Mississippi and the District of Columbia. I have read this contract in its entirety. I think one of the members of the media caught up with me by some means last night, and I told him I would read this document in its entirety. And I want to represent to you that I have read this document in its entirety. This is not a good document for the city of Starkville. It is a bad deal for the city of Starkville. It is a bad business decision for the city of Starkville. Now, of course, I respect my colleague, the member of the bar, a few chairs down from me. Of course, you know, lawyers are just different on how they advise clients, but certainly with all due respect to my most honorable colleague, member of the bar, but if I was sitting here and a member of this board asked me a question, and I represented a number of boards throughout the state of Mississippi, and I would just tell that board member, because my job is to advise as to the law, I would say no, that this document does not comply with the law. And by doing that, I'm not getting into the policy. I'm not getting into the decision making. Now, the attorney says that it's arguably that it violates state law. Well, if the law says that the term cannot exceed 25 years and we got a 45-year contract, that means it violates state law. You know, the initial term is for 25 years. It has 2 consecutive terms, a renewal that's controlled by Telepac, and of course that's what the agenda say, but it didn't say doing business as C-Spire. Why I don't have the full name there, but it has 2 consecutive terms of 10 years. And that's a long time to lock the city of Starkville in. And remember now, I'm not against growth and economic development, but as we sit at the table, we must come up with some good mutual terms for the taxpayers, because in the whereas clause, if you adopt this franchise agreement, you are representing and confirming that this agreement is in the best interest of the citizens of the city of Starkville, Mississippi, and you're further representing that this agreement is reasonable. Now, how can an agreement be reasonable when it violates state law? How can it be reasonable? And another key term in that Telepac C-Spire is asking us to approve this ordinance, and if you approve it, ladies and gentlemen, it will supersede any other ordinance on the books. Now that's in 2 places in the ordinance. If you approve this ordinance will be the governing document, notwithstanding any other ordinance of the city of Starkville. And notwithstanding means that bottom line is that this agreement controls. C-Spire does not have to comply with any other ordinance of the city of Starkville if you approve this. Now, why did C-Spire reject this? And now, as a member of this body and as vice mayor, I've been informed that C-Spire rejected a lower term. Why are they rejecting this? You know, they want to come in and dictate to us within our corporate and municipal limits or how they do business. There's nothing wrong. I do this every day, sit down with attorneys and other individuals. You got to negotiate. If, you know, reasonably, you can't just move into these documents on a unilateral basis. There's no way you can do business like that. Further, another key provision there is that the definition that deals with the basic video services, that in the definition section, that could have a limit on the revenue potentially that the city of Starkville takes in. Let's get C-Spire to the table. Yes, C-Spire, we want you here in Starkville, but before you do that, the taxpayers demand of me as an elected official here. We're not against growth. We're not against economic development. We're not against business, but if you're gonna come here, you got to sit down at the table of negotiation. This got to be done right. Like the gentleman from Ward 2 said, there are concerns. We don't rush into something because 9 or 8 other municipalities say so. You don't do business like that. You'll go down the wrong path. Those other municipalities did not elect us to serve. We represent the city of Starkville, Mississippi. Another key provision in there. They want to limit the insurance on $1 million liability insurance policy. Where's the indemnification language, Mr. Attorney? Let's get some legal advice at this table. The citizens demand that. What's the urgency? Economic development officials, get C-Spire in here and let's talk with them. We pay $50,000 a year for economic development, and we need some representation to tell C-Spire that this is not a good deal. Now, I'm not speaking against them coming into the city. Don't take me wrong, press. Public, do not take me wrong. I want them here. I want them to come in with some reasonable terms, some reasonable objectives, so we can have a document that we can live with, a document that we can abide with. Another provision, C-Spire will not pay any permitting fees. Why are we going to waive this revenue if we approve of this? The general counsel from MetroCast raised some good points. We can't assume anything. If we go into a court of law, the courts have made it clear that a contract is going to be enforced according to its terms as long as the contract is not broad, vague, or ambiguous. At the lease board, and I say this respectfully, at the lease board, let's delay voting on this matter tonight, at least so we can get some terms that perhaps that we can live with. These terms are just not workable. And based upon my reading this, there's no timeline for implementation of service. And before I forget this point, the gentleman from 2 made it clear who is the project manager. So if you're going to pass this tonight, the document says you must name the project manager. And I'm sure that someone has somebody in mind who's going to be the project manager. So if there is a motion to adopt this agreement tonight, it definitely needs to include the name and the title of the project manager, because I do not want to have to find out about it in the newspaper or in the streets. We do not need to rush through this, just like the matter of that huge contract back on about June 5 of 2012 that hit the table dealing with the municipal complex. We need to take our time and wade through the city business very carefully. And I just want to share these comments, given my legal background in representing agencies, boards, and commissions. And having served on this board in excess of 20 years, I want to give you the benefit of my knowledge. I know that there are those who may disagree with me, but I want to give this knowledge and experience and wisdom to those who are listening and to the media. But these are some of the many valid concerns that I have about this plan, and also about the 2% gross revenue that is mentioned here. So there are a lot of concerns about this contract. Now there are some who may talk about that we get the money for the schools, but money is not everything. But at the same time, we got to make sure we got a very good, solid, conservative, sound, legal document. We're talking about 45 years to be in the hands of this mighty corporate giant. We need to make sure that we protect ourselves. So C-Spire, yes, Alderman Perkins want to work with you. Yes, I want you to be here. Yes, I'm in favor of business. Yes, I'm in favor of growth. Yes, I'm in favor of economic development. But in light of all these things, C-Spire, I want you to come to the table in good faith with an open mind, and let's adopt some of these provisions, at least some of the major provisions. Let's reduce the term of the contract. Let's not waive the permitting fee, ceasefire. This is a bad business deal. The attorney may not say it, but this is one lawyer that will tell you. This is a bad business deal. It represents bad public policy. Now, there's nothing wrong with the gentleman from Mississippi State and all of you who appeared here. I know you want this service, and we want you to have it. But it got to be on some better contractual and legal terms. That's my point. You know, that's just my experience and my background. I'll be happy to be a part of a group to sit with ceasefire, and I do not mind telling them that the taxpayers of this city want some better terms. And that should be what we demand, and we should not have anything less. And I know that there appears to be an environment here to move forward. But one thing for sure as I close, we do not want to look back and say, I just wish I had done something better with this contract. While you have the parties at the table, you better put in there what you mean and mean what you say. Otherwise, the court's going to say, well, the city of Starkville was represented by legal counsel. The city of Starkville knew what they entered into. They were competent to enter into this contract. They knew the terms. The terms are understandable. They are forcible. There was a meeting of the minds. And this is it. We're going to enforce the contract between the parties. And that's going to be the ruling, in my opinion. So I respectfully, and I give great respect to all of my colleagues at the table. I give respect to my colleague, the general counsel for this city. I give respect to the mayor. But it would be remiss in my duties to my constituents and to the taxpayers if I did not say these things. I did not mean to be long, but sometimes you have to take the time to, as the gentleman from 2 say, you got to fully address these things. If we do not act tonight, I do not believe ceasefire is going to shut that door in the city of Starkville. They're not going to do it. I'm a Baptist. I got too much faith. They're not going to do it. So, Mr. Mayor, with that being said, I'm going to yield the floor, and I just hope that at least in the alternative, let's give one more try to get them back to the table and get some better terms, and thank you for the time, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions or comments by the members of the board?
Get two. I'll come later.
Alderman Nguyen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Let me say this. You couldn't ask for a better supporter of economic development than myself. I'm saddened that ceasefire has brought this to us. This is not good in any way for our city. I'm going to reach my statement that I prepared last night as I went over this, and yes, I got my stickies. And by all means, I respect my colleagues on this board. But if you gave them a test tonight on this document and asked 5 basic questions, I bet you they couldn't pass it. As a member of this board representing our city, I have become increasingly uncomfortable with the measure before us this evening regarding telepack. The terms are completely uncomfortable for our city and do not serve in the best interest for our city. I spoke with our vice mayor, and I only wanted his legal opinion. I was not interested in his personal opinion. He shared only his legal opinion with me. I then contacted our board attorney and shared with him that I was concerned, and he stated I should be, and I am at this time. I'm concerned about the terms. For any board member to embrace this measure at this time based on the terms would clearly demonstrate irresponsibility. I cannot support this measure at this time. Let me read another statement. If you are a businessman or a developer here in Starkville or in our state or anywhere else and you want to do business in Starkville, this is what I'm going to encourage you to do tomorrow. If you are a businessman or developer in our city, or you want to do business with our city, and this measure is passed, please call City Hall and request that you have it your way and that no ordinances apply to you either. Demand the same treatment ceasefire will be getting. That number is 662-324-4021. Thank you, and I yield the floor at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions or comments from Alderman Ball?
Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna go back to Mr. Vernon. When were we gonna select a project manager? When were you gonna tell us about a project manager? When would this be selected? We got tonight, and we got to vote and then don't even know the project manager. I mean, that's still leaving us still sitting in the dark.
It's fine with me if we want to include a project manager in the document. If one's not included, I will either do it myself or delegate somebody. But I don't think it's a bad idea at all to include in the motion who the project manager is.
Another thing, the order, ceasefire not guided by no orders of the city of Starkville, and that's not fair to the other business people here. They're not guided by no ordinance. In the 45 years, 25, 45, that's locking us in. I yield the floor, but I want to make a motion that we have another public hearing on this matter.
Motion has been made by Alderman Vaughn to hold a second public hearing on the franchise agreement. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Perkins. Alderman Vaughn, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
All right, well, I will weigh in on this one, and I will tell you, this is not the case of C-Spire just driving a hard bargain because they want to be mean. C-Spire has got a program that they are rolling out tomorrow, and they have said as of Wednesday, December 4th, you're either on the train or you're not. And let me just remind everybody that the reason the terms of the contract are so is we and 32 other cities went after this. We said, C-Spire, this is an opportunity we want to bring to our city, and we recognize because you're going to make an investment of tens of millions of dollars when you have no guaranteed return on your investment, that we are going to have to make some concessions as a city. That has always been my position. But I will tell you this, holding a second public hearing on this is a death knell for this opportunity. And it's not because C-Spire is handing us an exploding offer. It's because they've built a program. They've offered the opportunity, and they had 9 cities that were selected for this special opportunity. Now, by the end of tonight, in all likelihood, 8 of those cities will have approved this agreement. I'll tell you, 6 of them had already approved it, the same franchise agreement. Part of the reason the terms are as rigid as they are is C-Spire was negotiating this franchise agreement with 9 cities at the same time. And they said, we've got to be completely fair with all of you. And we're just not going to enter into the process where we start changing for one and then going back to 8 other cities and change. Yeah. Now, that's the same deal that each of the other cities was offered. What is somewhat mystifying to me is how each of the other cities have recognized the opportunity and gotten to the table. One of the cities, when they met with prior to the announcement to discuss the franchise agreement, went back on the same day of the announcement, had a special call meeting of their board, and they approved a franchise fee, a franchise agreement that included a 0% franchise fee. And not because C-Spire asked for it, but because they wanted to demonstrate to C-Spire how important they felt this service was to their citizens. And they approved it that night. The others have fallen in line, and as I said, tonight, there are the final 3 of us that are trying to get on board the train. Hattiesburg and Horn Lake are the other 2. I understand that both mayors from those cities indicated they expected no problems getting the agreements passed tonight. I do anticipate if we get to a vote on this, we, in all likelihood, are going to have the first, if not the only, split vote on this. It just simply hasn't been an issue in the other places that have dealt with this franchise agreement. And I don't know what to chalk that up to. I can tell you this, it's not my responsibility to be concerned about those other cities, but I believe wholeheartedly, as much as I did the first day this product was rolled out, that this is an opportunity that if we miss as a city, it will be our loss, and we will kick ourselves down the road. I can assure you. I'm as sure about that as I have ever been sure about anything I've said from this table before. That being said, let me discuss a few other things that were discussed. The 2 provisions in this contract that get discussed the most are the provision with the 25-year term and the 2 10-year automatic renewal provisions. this has been a much discussed subject among lawyers. And I think any lawyer would look at it and say, that is a term that pushes the line legally. It's one that that lawyers would argue about. But it is just as arguably permissible as it is impermissible. The way that term operates is there's a 25-year term that the parties are agreeing to. And then there are 2 subsequent automatic renewal terms of 10 years. Also included in that is 2 years prior to the expiration of the 25-year term, the city can commence negotiations with C-Spire. Now, an extra layer of coverage that's provided is there is a severability clause in the contract, which acknowledges if anything in the contract should violate public policy, then it comes out of the contract. So in a worst case scenario, 25 years from now, perhaps 23 years from now, the city and C-Spire may be arguing about the enforceability of that contract provision. I can tell you from a practical standpoint, to kiss this opportunity goodbye because of what may arise resulting from 10-year automatic renewals that would be discussed 25 years from now seems short-sighted to me. Much has been discussed about MetroCast having the same deal as C-Spire. Let me be the first to say, when MetroCast gets ready to offer this service, I will be the loudest supporter of MetroCast getting the exact same deal or whatever deal they would like to negotiate to provide this service at that time. And essentially allows them access to right-of-way for the purpose of wiring a cable transmission to a house any way they can get it there. This agreement with C-Spire is much more narrow than that. It provides them access to right-of-way only for a series of closed transmission fiber optic pathways. And what that means is they have it for the limited purpose of deploying a very, very costly technology. A technology that costs approximately $56,000 per mile to deploy. What that means, and this gets us to our second, or our other provision, is that up front, they're going to pay tens of millions of dollars to deploy this system. So they are seeking as long of a term as they can possibly get because it will take them up to a decade to pay back their initial costs into this system before they can then expect to potentially make a profit. They also have a clause in that ordinance that says it supersedes other city ordinances, but there's a caveat on that. It supersedes other city ordinances with respect to the construction of this system and the delivery of services. What they're saying with that is we want to extend the term as long as we possibly can so we can make sure that we have every opportunity to recoup our investment in this system. And in addition to that, we want to make sure, since the city has lawmaking powers, that you're not going to change the law to change the rules of the game so that while we are building out this system and incurring the long-term payment on it, we might further incur financial liability we didn't anticipate. The last thing I'll conclude with is there has been discussion, a lot of discussion about offering the same deal and provision in the MetroCast contract. This is something that comes up commonly anytime somebody is coming into the market to potentially compete with an incumbent video service provider. So much so that the FCC has issued a rule on the subject, and they have held that these level playing field clauses violate the Cable Act. And I want to read a portion of what they said because it touches so much on the discussion that we've been having here. It says, one specific example of the type of local laws that this order preempts are so-called level playing field requirements that have been adopted by a number of local franchising authorities. We find that these mandates unreasonably impede competitive entry into the multi-channel video marketplace by requiring local franchising authorities to grant franchises to competitors on substantially the same terms imposed on on the incumbent franchise operators. As an additional matter, just because an incumbent cable operator may agree to franchise terms that are inconsistent with the provisions of Title VI, local franchising authorities may not require new entrants to agree to such unlawful terms pursuant to level playing field mandates, because any such requirement would conflict with Title VI. Moreover, the record demonstrates that aside from this specific scenario, level playing field mandates imposed at the local level deter competition in a more fundamental manner. The record indicates that in today's market, new entrants face steep economic challenges in an industry characterized by large fixed sunk costs, without the resulting benefits cable operators enjoyed as monopolists in the video service marketplace. What the FCC has recognized and what their rule does in enforcing the Cable Act is they've recognized that incumbent cable operators enjoy the advantage of essentially having a monopoly of the cable service market. And by putting these provisions in that say for anybody else to come into this market new, you've got to live up to everything we lived up to, but you don't get the advantage of the monopoly we had to rake in profits on the system. They know that most of the time the competitor is going to fold in that system. So the FCC has said you can't do that. You can't do that because if that competitor never comes into the market, it's the consumer that suffers at the end of the day. What studies have shown is when there is no competitor in the cable marketplace, what you can count on is your prices for your cable service are going to be approximately 15% higher. That's the reason the federal government has outlawed this practice. So for those reasons, I would recommend, so that we can offer this program to our citizens, that we not have a second public hearing. We take this matter up and we pass it tonight.
May I be recognized, Mayor?
You may.
I want to clear up a couple of things after hearing all of the debate at the board table. Board members, first of all, y'all know that from mid-October to today, this contract has been negotiated and negotiated and negotiated with C Spire. And C Spire has rejected every single suggestion for the city of Starkville except reasonable rental rates for pole attachments and a 5% fee on gross revenue for video services. But C Spire is limiting that 5% fee to basic video services, which is only over-the-air local broadcast channels, which by my understanding would exclude Netflix and all of the things like that that people get on-demand video services. So this has been heavily negotiated. This is a take-it-or-leave-it deal by C Spire. That's number one. Number two, the mayor mentioned that he thought the city could negotiate at the end of the first 25-year term. I don't read the contract that way. The city does not have the option to negotiate after the 25-year term because the initial term and the renewal terms are combined as the term, and only at the end of the term, which is at the end of the 45 years, based on the express language of the contract, does the city have the right to renegotiate. Number three, Mr. Burnham raised an issue about whether C Spire would be able to go on private areas as opposed to public ways. I think the contract clearly defines that it's only the public way, Mr. Burnham, so I want to alleviate that concern. Fourth, Ryan Pearson, General Counsel for MetroCast, raised the issue of consent. If the contract is sold, the franchise is sold or transferred or assigned, Mr. Pearson represented that it would not take the city's consent to do that. I disagree. I think the contract says it would take the city's consent to do that, but the city's consent cannot be unreasonably withheld. So those are the accurate facts for you guys to make the decision tonight.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a vote on Alderman Vaughn's motion to hold a second public hearing on the matter. All those in favor of Alderman Vaughn's motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions? By a vote of 2 in favor with 4 against and 1 abstention, this measure fails. Now, we are still in discussion on the public hearing. Any further concluding comments on the public hearing? Any further concluding comments? All right, seeing none, we'll move into discussion on the consideration of the franchise agreement.
Mayor, may I recognize?
You may.
I would like to move approval of adopting the ordinance granting a non-exclusive franchise to Telepac Networks and naming Mayor Parker Wiseman as project manager for this project.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to adopt an ordinance granting a non-exclusive franchise to Telepac Networks, Inc. as presented and naming Parker Wiseman as the project manager in the franchise agreement. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Maynard, you wish to speak on the merits?
Yes, sir. I have great respect for the Vice Mayor and the points that he made tonight. I don't think any contract is a perfect contract. I think you have to look at the totality of the opportunity that exists before us. And from where I sit, I think this is a great opportunity for our city to capitalize on a new technology. And I think the additional benefit that we receive from new businesses coming into our community and the services that this is going to provide will outweigh those concerns.
Further discussion, Alderman Little.
I don't think any member of the board gets a warm fuzzy feeling from the contract as it sits. We, like City Attorney stated earlier, we've made repeated attempts to try to get them to make changes, and I only made one change that we had requested. It's something. It's a question of whether or not the board can live with it. At the end of the day, C-Spire is willing to put in a significant investment in our community for the betterment of our community. It's going to take years for them to recoup. Therefore, I can recognize the long-term contract. The legalities of it, Vice Mayor made some excellent points. The severability clause, I was looking at that earlier, and we have, I trust everyone has read it and read it repeatedly, because I know your phone's been blowing up the last several days with questions about it. How would the severability clause come into play if it was deemed, it can't violate statute? Can the contract violate statute?
No, if a law that controlled came on the books, and that would be a federal law like this FCC order that preempts a local law or a state statute that made a provision in this contract illegal, that would control, and that provision in the contract would be stricken. But as the contract reads now, it will control over local laws, city code.
Okay. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Alderman Carr.
With the 25-year and 2 10-year extensions, is that, to your knowledge, if a C-Spire person wants to come up here and explain that, but is that the same contract that was offered to the other 8 cities?
Gentlemen.
I'm Greg Loden, Senior Vice President, C-Spire Fiber, and it is the exact same provision that was in all of the other agreements, now 7 passed.
And as far,
Hattiesburg, unanimous.
and as far as the other topic we've been discussing is the time sensitivity of this, is this something that we've got to vote through tonight for y'all's project going forward, or is this something we can table and?
We are rolling out whatever cities are tasked tonight in the morning to start the pre-registration process on the internet. Without a vote, Starkville will not be included in that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may we recognize?
You may.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for your presence tonight. You've heard the comments. I take it you've been sitting here during the duration of this meeting here. And of course, just want to say this preliminary as I get into the question to you. You know, we're not bound by what other municipalities do. So my question to you is, why is there an urgency that Starkville got to live by your mandate tonight, that we got to either pass it or be excluded? But it would seem to me that, you know, if C-Spire wants to be, you know, an entity that wants to work with this city, that, you know, that we can have some of these things addressed. I mean, the city attorney has mentioned that the things that have been rejected, and does not look like that C-Spire, in my opinion, wants to just work with us in a very business way. We're trying to do our best that we can to work with you. So the question I want you to answer is, why is it that there's a mandate to Starkville tonight that if you don't do what we say do, in my opinion, that's how I'm reading it. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I want to mischaracterize the thing. If the city of Starkville does not do what C-Spire say do, then we'll forget Starkville.
So let me address the first question.
Yes, sir.
First. The franchise, and the reason for our rigidity on the franchise agreement, if you put yourself in our position, as soon as the first city adopted that franchise, when I go make a different deal with another city, now I gotta go back to that city and redo that deal. I gotta go, and as soon as I make a different deal with another city, because of the way this program is working, and you can see where that would just become an administrative burden that we just could not take on, quite frankly. The second part is we've made commitments to the 9 cities to get this stuff rolled out and get the process going. And in order to keep our commitments to those cities, we're rolling out in the morning. Any other questions?
Any further questions? Thank you. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Maynard's motion to approve the franchise agreement naming Parker Wiseman as the project manager, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed? By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is the request for approval of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments except for the fire department as of November 27, 2013. And for clarification purposes, please, as you're exiting the room, do maintain decorum.
Mayor, can we just break them in and give them time to leave, so?
Yeah, without objection. Well, this is the last thing we've got on open session.
Let's break. Let's just take a break, give them a chance to leave.
Without objection, I'm gonna move us into a brief recess, but everybody, please stay in the room.
Am I correct?
You now have before you request for approval of the claims docket, and just for clarification, Alderman Carver's father has retired from the fire department, so there will no longer be any recusal issues with the fire department, so it will just be a claims docket from here on. And our staff had gotten used to loading a fire department document and an everything else docket, and actually we had to correct it at the table tonight. This is just an everything claims docket. Happy? Discussion.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Little to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments as of November 27th, 2013 for the fiscal year ending on September 30th, 2014. Alderman Little, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Little, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay. By a vote of 5 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. Did I skip over? Or?
No, motorcycle lease agreement's next.
Oh, there it is. All right, and my understanding is that it can, all right. The city attorney and Captain Nichols have conferred on the police department matter, and I think the recommendation of both of them now is that that matter be held until December 17th.
Chief Outlaw, you okay with that? You okay with putting off to the 17th, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
All right, motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to authorize the approval of a contract with the city, motion has been made to table the request for authorization to approve a contract between Starkville and Harley-Davidson of Central Mississippi. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion? Yes, sir. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. That will conclude the open session portion of our agenda. We do have matters potentially pending for executive session. A motion to go into closed session is in order. Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to go into closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Maynard, you wish to speak on the merits? No, sir. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. This time, I'll ask that everybody clear the room so that the board can go into closed session deliberately.